Anyways, welcome back. Secret House Against, Tokyo-based hip-hop art and culture conversations. Independent, underground, avant-garde, experimental, abstract, just hip-hop conversations. Largely from the left, you know us. It's me, Deza, who's wearing a mask to protect us from cooties,
COVID.
perhaps, and Jet Axel Pavarotti. You know the vibes. Yeah, anyways, today we're here to discuss an album, as you can see in the title, by Sole and Televangel. It is called Dad's at the End of the World. It's a 9-song album, 34 minutes, a nice little quick joint. And this is the first time that we have discussed a Sole album on the show in terms of an album discussion. I've wanted to get to a few of his albums over the last few years that we've done this, but we just haven't got there yet. So I'm very excited to talk about this, and also for the fact that it's with one of our favorite producers, Televangel.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted to do the vault 1312, 1312. I wanted to do Post American Studies that year that it came out. That's when we started this. But we just haven't got to it. And Sole is an MC producer artist who's got a long and storied history in the independent underground. And Televangel also a long and storied history in the independent underground. Before we ever get into talking about the albums, we like to discuss how we're familiar with the artists. So I've got a lot to say about that. How do you know these artists, Jet?
Televangel would have been the AJ Suede
Metatron's Cube
doing this joint, the Metatron's Cube. Probably heard a few of his productions prior to that. And Sole is a mainstay. I mean, a legend. Sure. So that's just a name I'm
like Buck 65,
Buck 65. So yeah, someone
the Dose
always known. Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, probably a feature on Dose or something.
Okay. Yeah. When it comes to Sole, like I'm a old 42-year-old like 4-element independent underground weirdo kid. I first got into Sole like a lot of people in the late 90s due to the kind of controversy that was surrounding the battle with LP and him, which I won't reiterate anything about that here because I think that that's a huge disservice to the career that he's had, and most people that know about that don't really know about Sole. I've been a big fan for a long time. He was one of my top 5 favorite MCs. I saw him first perform in Hawaii at a strip club called the Pango Pango in like 2001.
Shouts out.
It was like, they weren't stripping in there. It wasn't like he wasn't doing like Bottle of Humans while
no
girls were like stripping.
That would have been fire too.
That would have been better maybe. But no, that was a great show, and I had a lot of homies performing that night too, like Proletariats and shit. And then so that's like, over 20 years ago. And then also I had the opportunity to kind of hang out with him at a homie's Orange Grove in Florida. Maybe 2006. Like we went out there and they ended up like him and Skyrider Band and Astronautilus were all staying in another part of the house and shit. And a bunch of us from the old like Sole message board were there, and that back then, like I even for a time I was a moderator on there. So I doubt that Sole remembers me. I've not had many like conversations with him. When I was hanging out with more of the Anticon guys in the Bay, it was after Dose and him had already left. I think he was in Rome at the time, or Europe, so Spain, Barcelona at the time. And I've just been a huge, tremendous fan of his work. There was, I've been a fan of his politics for a long time. Like back when my anarchist days, I was also right alongside with him on a lot of views. And while I consider myself a Marxist now, I've been following his career for a very long time. While I haven't necessarily, I hold so many of his older albums, his classics that I love, and I can't say that I have really enjoyed a lot of his more modern output, but I always usually buy his albums and I always support him because I believe in what he does as an artist, and I'm a huge, tremendous fan of the dude.
There are very few MCs out there who are so like honest and front and center with like a leftist politic. There's a lot of broad liberalism in the underground, and even the rappers who tend to be a bit more radical and a bit more direct tend to kind of be sort of vague about their exact tendency. Right. And I don't mean any like disrespect by that, because I think you don't have to like jump on the tape and be like, I'm a anarcho-syndicalist, but Sole has always been very like front and center with his anarchism, and I think that's always been a very important aspect of his music and writing.
I agree. Even back when it wasn't so pronounced that he was a practicing anarchist. He was always very deeply philosophical and thinking deeply about the relationship of his art and commerce. And the Anticon guys were always really great at that. And it's something that I still value to this day. A lot of those things kind of show up on this album as well. I used to have a lot of what I would call like soul isms, where lines would just be stuck in my head as things as like philosophical standpoints and such. And yeah, there's like very few artists of a high magnitude that say things like I'm a socialist, I'm a communist, I'm an anarchist, that are visible in the culture. And Sole to me is one of the legends, kind of giants alongside Televangel. So it's like Noname is one now, and Sole, and then you struggle to name anybody else who's as pronounced. A lot of those themes show up in the music, but not necessarily outright mentioning these things, outright mentioning like Guy Debord and Society of the Spectacle, and putting those things in their music. But not only putting those things in their music, but also actually out there as an activist. And what he does now, he does. I remember he was on. You guys know the podcast Rev Left Radio?
Yeah,
I think I've mentioned to you before.
Yeah.
It's one of the few podcasts that I tap in every once in a while, but I tremendously respect Brett and what he does, and put some money on the Patreon before. And he's a wonderful Marxist theorist and highly inclusive with people of all types of different leftist tendencies. And he had Sole on there, maybe at least once I heard it. And Sole is kind of he's an anarchist, and he leans towards more like eco activism and like ecological elements, ecology. And so like it's like now he's growing food and selling vegan stuff, and just interesting. So that's kind of, I know there's going to be a lot of people who have heard the name but have never really thought about the music. I can champion and talk about how many reasons and why I like this dude for so many reasons. Like the one of the kind of like non-rhyme stylers that was rhyming and styling without kind of rhyming, like him and Circus were early on that, and really highly influential throughout the underground scene. And I don't think that Sole gets enough of his flowers, and that could be for a variety of reasons, but he definitely deserves a lot of flowers. And this album, to me, if I can transition right back into discussing the album, this album for me is my favorite Sole that I've heard in a long time. I think a lot of it has to do with Televangel's production on this, but a lot of it also has to do with how I perceive Sole rapping on this album. It doesn't seem like a memoir of here's my life and everything was this way and it didn't go that way. It doesn't seem like a manifesto of his politics or anything like that. It seems like an artist who's matured and taking into account his experiences now, and also reflecting on it as being a younger like a father. And so it's essentially Dad's at the End of the World. To me, after listening to it, it was like about his two kids, him as a father, and him as the third kid, and his father. You know what I mean? Because it does go through those things, and I'm fucking with it. And in the background we've got Televangel production on right now, but I really was fucking with this album. And for one more thing, my little rambles.
Get it.
Dano, who is, Dano worked with DJ Mayonnaise. Shout out to Mayo. He's in our Discord and shit too. Hasn't seen him for a while, but he worked with Dano. So Dano's been a fan of Sole for a long time. He's like, this is the best shit that I've heard from Sole in a long time. And I've seen other Sole fans be like, this is the best shit since Selling Live Water. And I don't know if I don't think it's the best shit since Selling Live Water, but it has been my favorite Sole work in at least 10 years. At least 10 years. Yeah. And I'm happy to discuss it here. So what did you guys get from it? Like, you guys, like, I'm always kind of an asshole when it comes to discussing theory and bumping heads with a lot of anarchists. I know I can be like that, and you guys are around me all the time, so I'm sure some of the anarchist type of stuff you guys may have noticed that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, one of my notes is like, coming from someone like who hasn't like fully listened to him, like, yeah, this guy is an anarchist. Like, I could feel that right away. I mean, it's even in his bio on Bandcamp and stuff.
Very pronounced.
Yeah. But I didn't really notice too much of the third kid kind of an analogy, I guess you were painting
Okay.
right there.
Well, the song that he's discussing about his dad, right? Kids, right?
Yes.
With a relationship with his father. To me, it's just like, obviously, he's talking about being a kid growing up and having this kind of relationship with his father. So I kind of just tethered it together. Obviously, he's a dad and he has 2 kids and it's the end of the world, but the world has been, ending his entire life. And he makes points about that. Like, too young to duck and cover from nuclear scares, but also too old to worry about school shooters. And we're at that, like, right. Especially, he and I are probably comparable in age. I was probably at the tail end of this kind of Zennial, Gen X, millennial kid, where he's more, he was a tech guy, and he talks about that here too. And he gave all that up to stay on his ethics and do this, and his relationship with his dad informs a lot about the way that he's teaching his kids. So that's what I got from that,
And I have to say, while it is true that the album is not like just a biography or like an anarchist screed or a mission statement per se, it's also something I really like about the record. It is quite direct. I think, things like Sole's veganism and his like autonomism, like the this sort of belief, growing
right.
your own food, traveling, but like not just being like being
a pirate,
ethnographer or a pirate, like actually, getting involved in culturally and kind of what you can do within, your immediate circle and your community. Yeah. I thought that stuff was all really dope. I have to admit, I've listened to this record the least of the 3 of us because I'm an idiot and some stuff happened. But so these are very much like fresh impressions on my part, and thankfully we've got a long time
historian
peer,
Joe from Caltrops Press has been working on an Anticon kind of book that he's been developing a while, and I've discussed with him a long time because I've been around those guys a lot. I was a huge fan of them. I got quite friendly with a few of them while I was in the Bay Area, and just like, especially being I was on the lunch board, I was on the Restiform Bodies board, I was on Soul's People's Republic of Soul board, and I've followed them closely for a long time, and it's interesting to see.
It is notable, we're talking about Kids. That was the lead single off of this record, I believe. So
okay,
and for me, that song felt more like the central thesis or the mission statement of the record than the title track did. The title track obviously introduces the broader premise or whatever, but I think when it kind of zooms in, when we actually get the sort of focus, the sort of focal point of the record, I think Kids being the lead single, also being right in the middle of the record, track 6 of 9, I believe. The sort of broader like fatherhood and childhood dichotomy, I think is sort of an interesting central axis that the album revolves around.
There's a few things on this album, like, I thought I was pretty well versed in a lot of things that I've heard from Soul. Like, I never, I heard about a lot of like going to fat beats and stuff like that. I've heard he mentions Gita Board on this album. That's like right, 3 times, which he's done in a long time. I've known that for a long time. Him being in Rome, but I never knew about the relationship with his father. And this album, I don't think treats any of the songs like Homies in Homies in Catalunya.
Yes.
And also Kids. It doesn't really treat it with a kind of like a reverence to those things. It's more or less just like, yo, this is kind of like, I'm having this experience now. This is not a manifesto, but I have these things to say. And there's a lot of beauty in it too. Like there's something really poetic about him waiting for a watch, his father's watch, and never getting it. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's not a poetic throw that he's using. It's like a real thing that happened to him. And I find a lot of that stuff really interesting. Like One Penny, he's discussing things that we talk about when we talk about Makhami. It's like the majority of the world cannot pay for your art, and the way you keep it is that. But also Soul is like, he's got his ethics where it's like he's not putting his stuff available like that on the streaming DSPs. You could buy it to support him. And I have one of the reasons that I haven't cared for a lot of Soul's work in a long time is like, I don't like some of his rapping. I think a lot of his bars, like he's like many rappers, he's started writing more, like before, back in the days, like not rhyming a lot, and when he did rhyme, it was a little different. But like the first track here is like it really, he's just kind of talking at a time, but he also rhymes very simply on dad's at the end of the world. And it's like I just haven't liked it, and I've always liked that kind of raw, kind of passionate, fiery soul that lands on beat and has like the philosophical and poetic bars and the political bars. But there was a thing that I just didn't really like about his rhyming as it developed, and that's the same way I feel about Ghostface in a similar kind of way. Like I like Supreme Clientele and Old Ghost. When he became a bit more operational and stronger with the writing, perhaps it lost a little bit of that magic. And this album is the first album in a long time where it's like I'm not picking up on a lot of those kind of like rhymes that just make me go, ugh, that's a cat in a hat rhyme. I wouldn't say, right, in a cipher off of the head. But yeah, there's a lot of just really good stuff on this album. Like, listening to Jeezy's Thug Motivation because he feels like he needs permission to pull himself out of poverty. These are kind of real material circumstances that a lot of leftists and a lot of, a lot of well-intentioned and ethical people have to keep in mind when looking at the ravenous grasping of wealth and property and space and trying to figure out like how to move yourself out of that and not feel guilty for contributing to the system that is so terribly exploitive. And yeah, I fucking, I like a lot of shit. I was never a b-boy. I sat on a keyboard, something like a beat poet. I say this all the time. Jack Kerouac would have loved Anticon. Jack Kerouac would have loved Anticon. And the album also ends with Lift the Curse, where it's talking about, it goes from like really discussing activism and kind of transitioning more into like survival. It's like the activism is just, if direct action gets the goods, why hasn't anything fucking changed? Yeah. And maybe this is also a little bit of an anarchist kind of like more ideological tendency than what I might have, but it's not rhetorical. It sounds really like he wants an answer, and given the available options, he's like, fuck it, man, I'm just stack firewood, fucking store bullets, plant fruits and shit, you know what I mean? Teach the kids and write and kind of fight the best way he knows how. And it's a very mature album to me, and I think that this is, for all the soul fans that were waiting for something, this is great. I like that he's dipped his foot back in with an artist like Televangel, who is more connected to a lot of the elements of the independent, like, biosphere, the kind of community that we often talk about. AJ Suede, Milk. This, Televangel has albums with that. Nacho Picasso even. So this stretches a little bit different than his albums with DJ Payne 1, and it also has a different kind of intent. And I'm hoping, like I said about Dose having an album come out on Backwoods with Dove, like that is presenting these and same thing with KDI Kiki, who I met through the fucking the Soul Board or the Reservoir Bodies Board, friends for 20 years or whatever. Like, them being able to kind of reach out a little bit more, I hope this gives Soul a little bit of fire under him that makes him want to maybe connect and do songs with some of the people that we're more likely to talk about than some of like the upcoming, Strange Famous guys. Or I know hip-hop kind of, he's probably disillusioned with a lot of the hip-hop scene, because for a long time hip-hop scene really shunned him, based upon the things we were talking about earlier with the diss tracks and all that bullshit, and also just the industry stuff. So I know he was doing more shows with like punk guys and more like radical folk artists and stuff, but I'd like to see Soul get back into it, man.
Well, that's also where Televangel's like both a really interesting and I think a really great choice for the production on this album, because thematically this album does kind of the ecological factors that you have on this record, I think, lend themselves very well to the more sort of ethereal and melodic and sometimes like writerly grassroots type production that Televangel does so well. But at the same time, I do also think that contributes to just how like listenable this album is. It's like the poetry of this record is often very like direct and kind of actionable. Like you can sit down, you can take away exactly like what Sole is getting at from one track to another. And I think Televangel just lays out like a really nice canvas for that.
Yeah. I was so busy talking about like, you know, my thoughts on Sole. Like that is a really great point. Televangel provides a really wonderful canvas and like an emotional kind of an emotional space for Sole, not to be emotional, but for Sole to get these thoughts out. And a lot of it is a little bit airy and etheric, and it doesn't move all that much, but it's got just enough things going on and just enough of a vibe to keep your attention for the full length of some of these almost like 4-minute songs with Sole on it. And you know, I find myself repeating these and not realizing that it's like, oh damn, I just played this song 10 times in a row. And yeah, it's just, you know, I think, you know, Des, I know you're kind of quiet on this one here, because I think a lot of people don't like Sole. Are you not?
I just can't find a place to jump in between you guys.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all good. And it's,
yeah,
and yeah, you guys hit the points I wanted to hit, so I'm just kind of like, damn. So yeah, I mean, I do like the album. So can you finish what you were saying?
I just think that the space on it, like I fucked up and kind of just had one song repeating while I fucking ran on like, you know, champion ramble route thing. But yeah, there's just a lot of parts of this album that I find like the beat kind of makes the things sit a little bit more powerfully for me. Like the things said sit a little bit more powerful for me. Then even though it's like not like the deepest thing ever, and I don't think Soul's trying to be like, here goes a deep poetic thought about my experiences.
Let me put you on game, right? Yeah.
But it does work in that favor and just provides such a really cool space. Dad's at the end of the world. I identify with. Like one of the reasons we're so late recording is because I get a phone call from my 10-year-old daughter. I got to go find her. She fell off her bike and try to help her out and try to figure this out and navigate all these things in the world. And just like Soul telling his 6-year-old about Jesus Christ and about Pledge of Allegiance, like I'm trying to navigate those spaces with my daughter too, to teach her about, you know, the like what she will encounter is a half black, half all this other shit kid in Japan and racial identity politics and you know, the symbiotic relationship with neoliberalism on that shit, you know, like
your American daughter doesn't know what the Pledge of Allegiance is, so we're on the same page there.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's like a lot of this stuff is really, really interesting to me. And there's also a part of me that I would like to hear Soul get into some other bags when it comes to his anarchism. Because I have heard him reiterate Guy Debord about maybe 20 times. I'm over-exaggerating.
Comes up a lot, yeah.
But I love reading the Society of the Spectacle. I have so many notes that I've just made myself about the spectacle and how it's, you know, stealthifying and superficial manifestation of what's going on and all those type of things. And this is like, I even though, you know, my Marxist tendency, I grew up as an anarchist and I've read a lot of that literature and things like Society of the Spectacle and fucking Baudrillard and hyperreality and you know, those things are still I like to tie things to those when we're discussing art.
Even today.
Yeah, you know, I like even with like hauntology, when we're talking about the Buck 65 album,
yes,
it's like a very hauntological element of like this b-boy that never existed, you know, like this b-boy space that never existed. And Soul continues to be one of the artists that I don't worry about him, you know, not selling out or anything, but his ethics always seem to be on point. And that's why even when I don't have one of his albums on my top 20 albums of the year, I still put down a couple bucks on it to support him. And I'm pretty sure that I had a $10 order from an old thing that he used to have that I never put the address information in to update it, and he never sent it to me, and I don't care. He's given, like, he gave me a free shirt once, you know what I mean?
What?
Like, and so I'm just like, I support Soul. I rock with Soul. And it's good to have a conversation about him, especially with people who have no idea about, like, you know, cats that were not involved with this shit, that saw a video about, you know, that maybe were Run the Jewels fans or some shit and just decided against it. And it's like, no, man, I'm telling cats, like, you go and you listen to fucking you listen to Selling Live Water, you listen to Live from Rome, you listen. There was a time where it was like, yo, this guy sounds like he's the last remaining revolutionary in the sewer fighting the fight alone. And for like a radical like myself, I've been down with that. We're at DoCon 4 right now on the Pentagon Pizza Index and shit, right? Very much with a fucking a deeply sick individual running the United States of America per usual. But this fool just talked about wiping out a civilization. You know what I mean? On the back of Palestinian conflict. Go back and listen to whatever artists that you were listening to in 2007 and shit like that. Who was talking about Palestine in any real way? Sole has been on that for decades now. This is not a... He's not on the next brand of the political motto fucking bumper sticker politics. He's been you listen to fucking Man's Best Friend, Tar on Tar, and he's fucking talking about, Palestine, and it's not a new conflict, but it is one that revolutionary people have been down for and thinking about and reading about before October 7th. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's just like one of those things, like Soul's pretty much been on point the whole time. And it's interesting to see that kind of those two relationships and how they diverge with this kind of radicalism. And then one of them is doing fucking stadium shows sponsored by Citibank.
I mean, Soul selling out would be really funny.
Yeah. We need like a shiny suit Soul. What I mean? Like
Soul with like a 21 Savage feature or something. Like
I need like a face tats. You know what I mean? But yeah, man, fucking Soul, dude. Like amazing artist. And if people want, like, I could do like my top 30 favorite Soul songs as a Radio Free mega joint and just point out how fucking influential and the ripples and how dope this fool has been for a long time.
Harass Soul in the don't harass Soul. Harass Mega in the comments. Make him do that. Make him do that.
I've been wanting to do that with a lot of artists because I've loved Soul for a long time, but there's so many artists in this community that I've rocked with for a long time who don't get really any kind of notice in mainstream. Like even cats that I don't like, I never love, but like the Grouch. Like the Grouch is making albums about living in Hawaii and being in waterfalls and shit. Like I respect what Grouch did for the independent scene. I respect a lot of these guys, and like that's why we talk about like Pedestrian on here. That's why we talk about certain artists. This is not an album review show as much as it is as a discourse, conversational place for the dope art that is not necessarily getting the views. And sometimes it'd be art that's more popular, like that Sideshow. But sometimes you got to put it down for that, because at the end of the day, hit the like and subscribe, join the Discord, join the Patreon. I need that money. My wife going to jail, y'all. Bro. Have serious.
I love my wife.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure this shit don't happen, but you know the vibes. Secret House again. Oh, anything else? I'm sorry, Des. I didn't even let you get off, man. Good, I didn't let you get off.
You honestly said everything. I just want to say one last thing, though. The production is so amazing, man. I really enjoyed it, and I think some of the songs on this were during the COVID times. I'm not sure if that influenced.
It comes up a lot in the record,
The record, right? Yeah. So I don't know if that was connected to this idea of the end of the world. Kind of the whole world came to a stop. I mean, it's kind of interesting now that you can see certain records that are, like BC and like, all after that, So before COVID and all that shit, it's kind of like another timestamp in the just overall in the music lineage, I guess, So to see how it influenced artists is really interesting. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is it was a time. Fucking COVID feels so crazy when I scroll through my little pictures and shit. I'm like, damn, everybody's in mask.
Yeah, I feel like kind of doing a jump scare for people today, seeing me with the mask on and shit.
Yeah, but that's Tokyo. That's what you do if you're not a crazy person.
I will say there was one line that really stood out to me. The 9-to-5 workday became the 9 and 9 and 9 and 9 work-life blur. Like I felt that, man. I don't want to work, but if I don't work, I can't eat.
Yeah.
And
it's like money's whack until you fucking need that. You wish you didn't have to deal with it, and then you wish you fucking had some of that. Yeah. I get it, man. Like I've been waiting. I want to say I've been waiting a long time for us to kind of get to soul, to soul conversation. Yeah, hold on, man. Hold on. Like this shit. Desert Eague. This might be the last soul album. I was like, oh my god, this is fucking invincible. But listen to what we're talking about, the Rap Man Gavin joint, right? Like doing creative things on the fucking track with your voice and stuff. Like there's a part where it's like whatever he does is just fucking raw. I think he talks about Palestine on this too. You know what I mean?
The Desert Eagle is an Israeli gun, so yeah.
Oh.
You know, like a lot of cats like this, like non-rhyming style from like a Woods or like a Lucid, but like cat, it's a lineage of that too. Like, and Soul was very much like.
This is fucking sick.
Yeah. Get lost like Palestine. Spread love like Milton Friedman. Right here. Just fucking ill, man. Like I gotta say. Secret House Against. Spread love like Milton Friedman. Man. The white man makes missiles. Yeah, dude. Come on. Fucking Soul. Pay attention.